Good morning and welcome to Startup Yale. I'm Dr. Angelica Gonzalez, and I am the faculty director for Center of Innovative Thinking at Yale. City's mission is to inspire students from diverse backgrounds and disciplines to seek innovative ways to solve real-world problems. City serves students from across Yale's campus through mentoring, funding, and programming like Startup Yale. Today, you are in for a treat. We've got a full day designed for you, filled with hands-on workshops, inspiring pitches from founders in the arts, tech, health, climate, and beyond, and facilitating chances to connect with this vibrant community. But today isn't about watching innovation. It's about activating it. This is your chance to lean in, connect, and support the founders who are building what's next. This year's theme is Build with Purpose, Grow Through Community. The ideas you'll see today begin with purpose, but they only grow when people like you ask questions, offer feedback, make introductions, and show up for one another. So I encourage you all to do exactly that. Ask questions, make introductions, offer insights or encouragement. Wherever you are in the program today, I invite you to ask, how can I move this idea forward? And then take action. Lastly, I want to thank you all for being here. So let's get started. If you are in the Planetary Solutions Prize, if you are here for the Planetary Solutions Prize, you're in the right place. So stay put. And all other prize competitions and workshops will be held in the rooms through the doors in the back. I'll now hand the mic to Josie Jayworth to kick off the Planetary Solution Prize.
All right, thanks so much for welcoming us all, Angelica. Hello, everyone. I'm Josie Jayworth, the Environmental Innovation Fellow at Yale. I have the really awesome job of working at both City and the Center for Business and Environment at Yale, which is CBAE. Before we get started, as we gather here together today, I'd like to take a quick moment to acknowledge where we are. We're in the US's first net zero hotel, which is a very cool place to host this prize. But we are also here on native land. Here we acknowledge that the indigenous peoples and nations, including the Mohegan, Mashantucket Pequot, Eastern Pequot, Schaghticoke, Golden Hill Pugusset, Niantic, and Quinnipiac, and all other Algonquin-speaking people have stewarded through generations the lands and waterways of what is now the state of Connecticut. We honor and respect the enduring relationship that exists between these people and the nations in this land. And there are more ways to take action and learn more about the place where we currently are. I'm very excited to be able to welcome you all specifically to the Planetary Solutions Prize this morning. Over the course of the next hour and 15 minutes, you will hear pitches from 4 students who are working on building solutions to address some really big problems. Like Angelica said, we're inviting these 4 founders on stage to pitch, but we're also inviting all of you to be active participants today. While we're here in this room, please listen to these pitches these founders have worked really hard on. Appreciate the beautiful slides, laugh at any jokes that they have, and also write down your questions, suggestions, and connections that you have to offer. Find these founders after to share your support. Okay, so what's gonna happen is we're going to have each team come up for 8 minutes to pitch. They'll be followed by 8 minutes of Q&A from our fantastic 4 judges right here. Can you all raise your hands? Give them a very big round of applause. We have Jenny, we have Amir, we have Justine, and we have Brandon, who have all been super supportive through this whole process. And thank you all for being here and supporting this prize. But you all in the audience are also judges. You have control of the Audience Choice Prize, which is a $2,000 check to the team of your choice. So on your seat, you should find a card. Please listen to all 4 pitches before you fill out your card, and you can turn that in to the boxes that are in the back of the room on your way out at the end of the prize. Okay, so now before we get started, I'm really excited to invite up onto the stage Julie Zimmerman. Julie is the Vice Provost for Planetary Solutions here at Yale. She holds joint appointments as professor in the Department of Chemical and Environmental Engineering, School of Engineering and Applied Sciences, and the School of the Environment, and serves as Deputy Director of the Center for Green Chemistry and Green Engineering. Planetary Solutions is the funder of this prize and a wonderful partner in very many ways. To say a little bit more about Planetary Solutions and kick off the pitches, here's Julie.
This is my favorite day. This is awesome. We sit in an office in the provost's office here at Yale and think about all the ways that we can activate, amplify, celebrate what Yale is doing to bring solutions to planetary challenges. We work with students, faculty, staff, but we also work with our collections, our buildings, our endowment to try to align Yale's mission with the goal of solving planetary challenges. But to me, it is you guys and the students who are creating, innovating, developing the solutions. And so while we're all supposed to ask what we can do to help you, please tell us what we can do to help you. As an institution, what can Yale be doing? Because that is why we are here, and what we are here to do is to try to elevate, celebrate, amplify, and launch you guys out into the world. So I'm really excited to see these pitches. I'm really proud and happy that we can support this work, and I wish you all the best of luck. I am introducing our first presentation, which is Janelle Lee, who is pitching for Oilzyme. Oilzyme is a biotech venture that deploys shipboard microbial consortia to safely break down tanker sludge and oily residues during voyages. Yeah? All right.
Thank you so much, Julie. Can you guys hear me okay? Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Janelle. Just to start off, quick note, I'm actually recovering from a concussion, so I have a few notes just in case my brain skips a line. But let's get right into it, shall we? So I grew up in Singapore, in the middle of the world's busiest shipping lanes. And occasionally, accidents happen with so much activity. Oil spills. When it comes up onto our shores, you can see it, you can smell it, and it's absolutely revolting. And they mobilize teams, come onto shore to bag up these contaminated sand. And I wondered, is this truly the best way to deal with this problem? And I found myself in Professor Stephen Pointing's lab. So what we did here was to model oil spills in marine coastal sediments. We've since written 2 papers together and have appeared on the news. And since I graduated from Yale NUS and I came to Yale for my master's, Stephen kept working on this idea. And then he called me one day and said, I think we actually have a solution here. So we reunited and built Oilzyme. So let me show you the problem that we're solving here. This is cargo tank sludge. This is the toxic residue that builds up every time a tanker has to clear its tanks. It's full of carcinogens, heavy metals. It smells a lot worse than it looks. And it builds up every single voyage. Now the scale of this problem is actually enormous. 3 to 5 million tons of this sludge is generated across the global fleet every single year. And with this, the cost for the shipping companies, they pay over $1 million to deal with this sludge on their ships. And with every ton of sludge incinerated, it releases 1.1 to 1.5 tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So now the industry has 4 imperfect options of dealing with it. The first is incineration. Not only is it costly, it is carbon intensive. And you have chemicals, which creates hazardous byproducts in the process. And you also have mechanical separation, which is expensive and more often than not also includes chemicals. And lastly, there's illegal dumping, which is not an option, but irresponsible companies do that. But there's rising fines around it, and there's increasing enforcement around it. Now with regulatory pressures building, look at the IMO 2050, the EU ETS now covering shipping, and rising disposal fees. The industry needs a fundamentally different solution. And here's where Oilzyme comes in. So what we built in the lab with Professor Pointing has now turned science into solution. These oil microcosms are from my 2024 undergrad thesis, and they form the basis of our current microbial consortia. The lab was where the science became Oilzyme. So what exactly is Oilzyme? Oilzyme is a dry powder, a microbial formulation in natural substrate. What you do with Oilzyme is to put it in the holding tank. Once you add it to the holding tank, it activates in water. The specialized bacteria form a biofilm on the oil surface and slowly break down the petroleum hydrocarbons into simpler, safer byproducts, like water, biomass, and carbon-containing byproducts. Ownership is just 3 easy steps. The first one, dose. After the cargo is discharged, you add it to the holding tank. The second, degrade. So as the ship travels back, during transit, the bacteria go to work and break down the oil. And third, discharge. On arrival, the treated water is designed to reach the MARPOL Annex 1 discharge threshold. This is below 15 parts per million oil, subject to lab validation and regulatory approval. And the benefits stack up very quickly. First of all, $750,000 in annual savings per vessel. And this comes with 330 tons of carbon dioxide avoided per vessel per year. And all this comes with no hardware installation, no chemicals necessary, ambient stable formulation, and lastly, the bacteria we use are native and non-pathogenic, safe to use with bare hands. We're designed to meet MARPOL, the International Maritime Pollution Convention standard, and have an approval pathway mapped with Singapore's Maritime Port Authority regulators. And here's how we compare. So the 3 existing approaches that I mentioned earlier, chemicals, mechanical separation, incineration, they all sit in the high cost or high carbon quadrants. Oilzyme is the only one that sits in the low cost, low carbon corner. Now, many startups have a strong concept. What distinguishes Oilzyme is that we already have a real industry engagement, real sludge samples that we're dealing with, and a real pilot pathway. Now, in just the last 12 months, we've gone from lab bench to working with the world's largest product tanker company, Hafnia, with 117 vessels in their fleet. So we tested our bacteria against their actual sludge samples in the lab and have yielded strong reduction in total petroleum hydrocarbons. And we've also obtained the exact tank specifications. We know what we're working with, and we are tailoring our pilot to that. Along with this, we also have $150,000 funding for Professor Pointing, which we are delegating for our scientific development and proof of concept. And last and most importantly, we have a signed letter of intent with Hafnia, the world's largest product tanker company. So moving forward, NUS licensing discussions are underway, but there are no restrictions on our commercialization or our company setup. The shipboard visit and pilot are in preparation. And from the recent Asia-Pacific Maritime Conference, we've connected with groups like HEMPO, IMCO, Hattenborough Water, Shuzhou Tianyu. So these are all conversations that are helping us build a credible commercial pathway to the maritime ecosystem. This is a billion-dollar opportunity hiding in plain sight. The global fleet has 8,800 tankers. And we are starting in Singapore with our 5-year target of 250 vessels. This gives us $34 million in annual revenue. Each vessel is a recurring annual contract, which gives us a much more scalable model than a one-time project work. So our business model is simple. Annual per vessel contracts, priced at 15 to 20% of what it currently costs tankers. This gives them over $750,000 in savings per ship. And if the pilot succeeds, we have a credible path to expand within an existing 117 vessel customer relationship. So as for our team, I lead the business. I'm currently at the Yale School of Environment. I was previously from Oxford and Yale NUS. I also had a previous startup in glass recycling, and I actually have a little pendant from that journey. And with me is Professor Pointing, my co-founder. So he's a professor at NUS with 20 plus years in bioremediation and microbiology. And he also led Singapore's 2024 oil spill response. We are actually going to treat that waste as well. As for our advisors and mentors, an industry mentor is not named due to privacy reasons, but I would like to highlight our partners, which include Hafnia's own leadership team. They give us direct access to the real operating conditions and real pathways to commercial adoption. So what does winning this prize unlock for us? This $35,000 goes directly into our shipboard pilot, specifically consumables, microbial formulation materials, monitoring and lab analysis, and to validate our results at sea. So what this successful pilot will mean for us, it will position us to move into the next 3 steps. The first one will be a commercial deployment discussion with Hafnia. This allows us to bring through a formal progression to the regulatory pathway. And third, to the initial multi-vessel contract conversations. From just the first 10 to 20 vessels, that represents over 3,300 to 6,600 tons of carbon dioxide avoided per year. And that represents $7.5 to $15 million in customer savings. That is the leverage of $35,000 of catalytic pilot capital. So this is a natural solution to shipping's dirtiest problem. Thank you guys so much.
Wonderful presentation. And I love the call to action on the pilot itself. On that topic, pilots de-risk your business going forward. And I'd love if you could describe what you hope for, what success looks like to you as a founder, and then what are the pieces that you admittedly don't just know yet, right? What will you hopefully answer in your pilot?
So I'll answer 2 parts of that question. So what does success look like, and what are some things that we do not know at the moment for the pilot? What success looks like for us will be about an 80 to 90% reduction in total petroleum hydrocarbon. To put it simply, it's the reduction by our bacteria of the oil in the tank through the course of the journey, and when it arrives at port, it should meet this MARPO threshold. So that means that it can be safely discharged into the water. Success also means that the crew finds it a seamless process. It's easy to adopt. I can show you one of the slides for that. So we've thought about one thing, which is crew adoption. Yes. So we made the process as simple as possible, but we do need real-time feedback from the crew. So we'll be having a ship visit. So we'll be talking to the crew, giving them a solution and saying, is this something that can be easily incorporated into your day-to-day routine? So success will be something that you say, yes, it's simple and we love it. It takes out the whole problem of having to pump it out at the end. And then a last success would be for the final outcome, the treated solution. As it passes through the water, we want to make sure that it doesn't pollute the water. So the oil filtration systems that come with the ship must be efficient enough to clear the oil, any remaining very low levels of oil through the system. So whatever is discharged into water as the ship moves is safe. And some things that we do not know yet at this moment are the real conditions as the ship moves. So we understand how the ship is as much as possible through our conversations with the Hafnia leadership team. Now our pilot is tailored towards how the conditions are for their specific ships. So for that reason, we've already tailored our laboratory analysis, made the conditions very, very similar to the ship tanker, but some things cannot be controlled. So for example, our current solutions sit in an incubator that does not move. But on the ship, it clearly moves, but what we do not know is how much it moves. Does this move aid in the microbial degradation of the oil? What we do know from the research is that yes, microbes love movement. So if you imagine, let me give an analogy. Imagine moving from like a tiny apartment to a beachfront property. So this is the environment that we imagine the migrating our bacteria from. So they're introduced into an environment that they love. With more movement means more aeration, so means faster microbial activity. So this is something that we anticipate to be a good thing for us. There are other risks involved, like other unknowns that we don't know, which is like, for example, the humidity, what's the saline conditions. So these are the things we've already accounted for in our lab experiments, and something that we've already tailored our lab experiments for to anticipate these worst case scenarios. From the lab analysis that we already have done, it has a pretty good results that we have strong confidence that it will be also similar on the ship.
Thanks, Janelle. This is really impressive technological innovation. I'm curious to hear more about how you think about the regulatory environment and what your pathway is to getting microbial solutions approved. And if you could educate us a little bit, I understand it's governed, and you emphasize that you're Maripol aligned, but what would the steps be to getting that approved as a solution? And how do you, and more importantly, how does Hafnia think about that? Is that a prerequisite for their LOI?
Okay. I have a slide. Let me show you one slide. Oops. Let me go to a slide real quick. Yes, okay. So our path to regulatory approval, I think like I mentioned earlier, we're working with MPA and our NEA context to make sure that our solution is fitted to Singapore's regulatory climate so that we can put our solution on the ships in Singapore's harbour. As for MARPOL, by aligning it, what I mean is that the treatment that we have is designed to degrade the oil to the extent that is below 15 parts per million oil. So this is the threshold that we are meeting. So this is the MARPOL aligned standard. And one thing that Hafnia did mention to us is something called the magic pipe problem or magic oil problem, either one of those. So this is something that is a concern for oil tankers. So imagine if, let's say, an oil tanker like Hafnia comes to regulators and say, I have this amount of oil that was produced during the ship journey. And at the end, they're like, oh, it's gone, we treated it. Regulators are going to be like, that does not seem right. Did you just dump it off the ship? And that's something that raises quite a few alarm bells. So one thing that we have to put in place, and we will put in place, is the verification and validation process. So at the end of the ship's journey, we will have to prove that the oil has been broken down into these products, into these specific volumes. So we can prove that, let's say, if we tested the atmosphere around the oil, it will show that the carbon isotopes in the atmosphere are the products of the bacteria breaking down the oil, not just from the carbon in the atmosphere. These are two different carbon isotopes. These are the conversations that we had with actually a different lab in Yale who has taught us that this is a way for us to validate the process. So this is the confidence that we're giving Hafnia that this is how you can show that your solution isn't just magically disappearing the oil off the ship, just dumping it out. They're not doing that. So to prove to the regulators, not just in Singapore, but to the ports that they go to, that the oil is being treated sustainably and with native bacteria. And native bacteria is also a big crucial point for especially Singapore regulators, because we're not introducing a new bacteria into the mix. We're not contaminating our shorelines or introducing something that might potentially disrupt the ecosystem. These are bacteria that have been found on our shoreline and were taken from our shoreline actually. So where it brings to, it does not affect the ecosystem. I hope that answers your question.
Hi. A really impressive presentation, and you have me very much believing that you are going to be successful. So my regulation question is actually builds on that. So if you are in your version of success where you're replacing essentially big business within the maritime industry and knowing that those businesses work very closely with governments and have their own lobby, how are you thinking about potential sort of political hurdles that are going to defy ration and common sense and desire to remediate, et cetera?
That's an excellent question. Something that we have thought about, a big issue that might come up is what happens when, let's say, the material recovery facilities in Singapore come to us and say, you're diverting a very crucial form of energy away from us, because something that Singapore does is our incineration plants actually burn these material for energy. So we're diverting it away. And sometimes for mechanical separation, for example, once you separate the oil, I would say, you can put it simply as good oil and bad oil. Good oil can still be used for something else, and bad oil still has to be safely discharged off through certain methods. Can be incineration or chemicals. So companies like this will be probably resistant to the idea. But what we can do is to collaborate with them. So one of the companies that we were talking to at the Asia Maritime Conference actually operate an oil rig, and they said to incorporate our technology directly into their system. So I think our greatest push point and our competitive moat will be to give them, our customers directly, large cost savings that cannot be ignored. Okay, sorry, sorry. Large cost savings that cannot be ignored, and that's how we can encounter those hurdles. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, next up, I'm really excited to introduce Shiv Chaturvedi, who is going to be presenting on Apical. Apical improves solar power forecasts by correcting cloud-driven sunlight errors using physics-informed machine learning. Come on up.
All right, audio check. You guys can hear me? Sweet. Oil's Eye was cool, right? I also agree. I think that's going to be very successful. Sweet. All right. Good morning. I'm Shiv from Apical, and I'm here to tell you about a problem that has come into my life or my awareness about 4 or 5 months ago, which is that modern solar forecasting has a 40-year-old understanding of radiation physics. I didn't understand what any of that meant 5 months ago, so I don't expect you to understand that either, but I'm going to tell you that our solar forecasts today are one-dimensional, literally, like we use one dimension to predict them. And I'll talk to you a bit more about that in a minute. But basically, this one-dimensional prediction means that we have inaccurate forecasts of solar radiation, and so we suboptimally use our grid resources because we underpredict how much solar we're going to be able to generate, or overpredict on a given day. All right, let's talk about one-dimensional solar. Here's my understanding of our world. We have clouds above us. We have a sun above that. The sun shines down on the cloud casts a shadow down. There's a shadow there. Sun moves throughout the day. The shadow stretches. Imagine like a flashlight around a tennis ball, right? Like the shadow would get bigger and bigger as you move it to the side. We know that. We know that's true. What we also know is that it's not that simple when it comes to clouds. Clouds can be of different shapes. They can be wispy. They disappear and appear within minutes. They're basically giant prisms of water, and so they scatter light everywhere, and then light can escape out the sides. So even in those shadows, there's like hot spots of radiation. It would be comically difficult to actually model that out, and even more expensive to actually have a computer do any of that computation and forecasting. So our solution to that is not to do it. We basically treat clouds in modern atmospheric and climate models in one dimension, which is up and down. No matter where the sun goes, the models understand that the shadow of the cloud is directly below it. And that's great because it's super computationally efficient, and it comes with the cost of inaccurate forecasts, especially when the sun is low in the sky or if there's a lot of clouds in the sky. And this makes solar energy in particular a little bit more complicated because now there's poor predictions where in 30% of the generation window, we don't really know how much radiation we're going to have, so we can't predict how much solar we'll be able to generate or how much we'll be able to sell into the market. These errors also compound over time, especially when there's multiple clouds in the sky. There's overlapping shadows. Our little models' brains would break if they thought about that. And this leads to an overall systematic overestimation of solar power. It's worse in the mornings and in the evenings, but especially bad up here in the winters where the Earth's tilted away from the sun and we have hours and hours of darkness. And the grid pays for it today. The utilities and grid operators pay for it because they hold a ton of natural gas to deploy into the grid if they feel that they're coming short on what their needs are. Solar and storage developers like batteries pay for it today because they're more conservative about how much they can dispatch or how much energy they can charge or how much they can store, especially as solar penetration grows. And forecast vendors like the incumbents today, they pay for this because they're judged on how much error they're generating. And they could be doing a lot better, and instead they can't because we just don't have the technology. We believe we can help. Who's we? Well, there's me. I am a joint MBA and Masters of Forestry at the School of Management, School of the Environment, a forward management consultant. And the brains of the operation is my fiance, Maggie, who is a PhD at Columbia's Applied Physics and Math Department with a focus on radiative physics. And she's a former data scientist for Grow Intelligence, which did a lot of this work for agriculture. Okay, So Maggie's research for the last year has been working on fixing climate models, which are already pretty unreliable, and she specifically focuses on solar radiation and clouds. In her year-long journey, I thought, well, this could actually apply pretty well to solar. And it turns out it does. If you just use 3 of the various aspects of global observation we have today, which is cloud cover over an area, aspect ratio, so how tall a cloud is compared to how wide it is, and solar zenith angle, which is where the sun's at in the sky, you can do some really crazy math. I did not do that. This is all Maggie. And using the Department of Energy supercomputers, which Maggie has access to, you can run basically 10,000 simulations. Each simulation is 3 million cloud scenes, so this is now the world's biggest data set of cloud radiation. And you can find that through those equations and a few more, you can capture almost 90% of the truth. Today's one-dimensional models capture 62%. With just a few equations and nothing else, you can correct those into almost 90%. And that's a 54% reduction in error over the one-dimensional models. So we thought we'd package that up as apical, a correction layer which takes the existing forecast providers, runs an API call, which basically just takes their prediction and corrects it, gives you a better answer. It was a quick and easy fix, and we're super excited about it because it'll bring benefits across the value chain. For forecast vendors, it's a drop-in improvement to their product. I am telling you your stuff can be better. Here you go, done. Utilities and grid operators, I'm telling you that you will no longer have to worry about how much natural gas to hold back. You can hold back a lot less. For solar and storage folks, you know now when you can charge your batteries or when you can discharge your batteries better based on how much solar is coming in a given day. And we want to go about this by capturing as much of the market as we can while also thinking about what impact we can have. Today, the solar forecasting market is about $1 billion, and it's growing as solar grows. In the US, it's about $150 million of revenue just in solar forecasts. We don't know that we entirely fit into this space because we are a correction, but we do know that our correction pays for itself. We've approximated that we're going to charge about $200 per megawatt per year. And at a typical 100 megawatt farm, who currently lose about $500 to $1,000 in forecast costs, this would be a big win for them. We also think there's a clear impact piece here where just on the per asset piece, the major grid operators, the people who own these solar farms and are responsible for sending the power into your grid and thus to your light bulbs, will save a ton of money if they can get the areas better. Right now, it's about $2 to $4 billion in any given system. There's also pretty cool carbon impact, which I'm pumped about because I hate carbon. Well, it's good, but I hate carbon in the atmosphere. At only 100 sites, which is what we're targeting as our ideal market to start with, that's 50,000 tons in carbon emissions avoided annually. There's also system-level tailwind. The Berkeley lab shows that just a minor correction in how much our solar forecasts are on today will reduce 30% of total grid reserve. And that would be great because as solar grows, this number would go up in size. Our plan is to validate through operators, where we'll start with a pilot, run in shadow mode on CAISO or ERCOT, which are 2 of the big grid operators in the US, and then go into vendor partnerships to work with current forecasting operators. Because I'm running low on time, I'll try and go to the more granular view of that. Here's where we are today. We're having conversations with folks across the grid industry and the marketplace, and we're having commercialization discussions with Columbia Technology Ventures. As of yesterday, we're good to go ahead and patent 2 out of the 3 most important pieces of it. The third piece, we don't really need. Patented. We need it. We don't need it patented. In the next 3 months, we're going to try and get a satellite data subscription to give us all of the information we need. Over the next 3 months after that, we're going to backtest by going to a solar farm and saying, let us just do our work on the side and compare with what your results are like. Once we know how much better it is, we're going to go to the forecasting folks and to the broader grid and say, look, we proved that we can fix your error in 2 farms. Let's do it across the whole system. Let's save you some money. Let's save the atmosphere some carbon. We're doing this because we believe that as solar becomes the grid, forecasting is going to become a critical part of the infrastructure. And so Apical's goal is to be the best correction layer in the industry, and I'm here to talk to you about that as much as you need to. So find me later if you have any questions. Well, that's us. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for that. I'm curious about your customer discovery, that sort of last part of how you think about the process. And what you've described as a correction layer is kind of at the heart of my question of whether you're building, a company or a product.
Yeah.
And how do you think, I guess the tension's most obvious if you think about partnering with the solar forecasting providers and selling into them versus as a feature versus going to the grid operators and generators and how you think about those two paths.
Yeah, welcome to my big dilemma right now. The way we've thought about this, and based on conversations, is the only way we can really tell if this is effective is by starting with a grid operator or an asset operator. To say, go to a solar farm, let me see your forecast, let me correct that, and here's how much better it is. Because the forecast operators are less likely to give us access to their, because these forecasts operate across much wider regions than Apical can go for, we can get very, very granular compared to, which is a good thing, but it just doesn't work out one for one. Once we are able to validate with a asset or operator, we've had conversations with both Solcast and Tomorrow.io, and both have said that this would be something they'd be interested in bringing in-house. This is not a company we think is going to be venture scale. This is not something we're going to operate over the long term. The idea is to validate the technology, sell it, and hopefully, once it's sold to one operator, it's something that others can build upon and try and duplicate too. Which tears me up a little bit because I'd love for this to go to everyone all at once, but the most sensible way is to go for one person and just fix their product.
Hey there, thank you for the presentation. I'm both excited and warmed by the fact that we have such articulate people presenting. Hopefully, if this doesn't work out, you all should run for office. My diatribe aside, I'm just curious, have you thought about, when you talk about the forecasting, going to, it may be unconventional, but banks or other hedge providers and other things, because that would be the first place I would candidly start, because what you can bring is that system level improvement that allows people who are hedging, weather derivatives and other things, not to get too into the weeds, to create an enormous amount of value in multi-$100 billion markets. So I guess that's a really long-winded way of saying, tell me why you've picked the customer classes in the first instance for your minimum viable product that you have, and why you wouldn't flip it on its head.
Yeah, we spoke to a few hedge funds about this, all immediately interested because they're like, oh, 0.001% alpha, I'm in. Let me get that. Let me get your product. It feels weird to me to sell something that would otherwise do things I care about to go to people who I don't care about. That's it. That's really it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Great answer. Thinking about your moat, right, and as you value the business, no matter where you take it, and appreciate the awareness you have there, the proof points that you do have, right, that 55% improvement with 90% sort of relevance. How do you feel about, your partner's brilliant, the next person's partner being similarly or differently brilliant, right, at finding a competitive wedge against you and your customers?
Yeah, so the good thing is this is first of a kind physics. This has never been done before. It is something that the US government is now building into its climate model. So she'll be at Lawrence Livermore this summer building into the US DOE's climate model. So we know that the moat, that the last year and a half that she's worked on it, will take a very long time to replicate. This is years of running supercomputers. Not everyone has easy access to that. She's funded by the Department of Energy, so they sort of roll the red carpet out for her. The other thing of just the method we're going is what's patentable is taking the satellite data, looking and extracting the three sort of vectors we need, which is zenith angle and cloud cover and aspect ratio. That is patentable, and that is something we're working on. Columbia Tech Ventures has now given us a lot of attorney time, which is great, and they're helping us run through that patent. The actual physics is not patentable, despite it coming from first principles, but you can't patent math. But because this method is really the cleanest way to do it, and that's going to be patentable, we don't think that's something people can encroach on. They can try to come up with something new, but someone just spent a year and a half doing this on big supercomputers. Good luck to them if they're trying to catch up. Sweet. All right. Well, find me in the back if you have other questions or ideas. Thank you all.
Thank you. All right, I hope we're all learning some new math today. That's awesome. I'm now going to welcome up onto the stage Quinn Zacharias, who will be presenting Barefoot Metals. Barefoot Metals stabilize heavy metals in contaminated brownfield soils using enhanced rock weathering, a real specialty here at Yale. Engineer locally sourced basalt mines that accelerate mineral formation and immobilize metals in situ. So here we go.
Wonderful. Good morning, Startup Yale. It's my real pleasure to introduce Barefoot Metals, Inc., the future of brownfield remediation. We are the first company that is repurposing enhanced rock weathering, that is using rock for carbon capture. But instead, we're using it for remediating contaminated soil on old industrial sites. These sites are commonly known as brownfields. So what Barefoot does is make in-place remediation of brownfields reliable at a fraction of the cost. I'm Quinn Zacharias, a licensed remediation engineer, a Yale PhD candidate, and founder of Barefoot Metals. Brownfields are a costly and unresolved problem. They sit idle due to the cost of heavy metal cleanup, creating long-term harm to communities and the environment. According to the EPA, there's over 450,000 in the country. They often have property liens, can't be sold or redeveloped. The typical site can be up to $2 million to remediate. Just picture removing 1,000 trucks of soil out of state to only 30 specialized landfills. The EPA recognizes this challenge and has actually increased funding by 5-fold since 2022. So, at every remediation, there's a tipping point decision. Do we excavate or try some in-place remedy? Excavation is reliable, but very expensive. In-place remedies are much cheaper, but not always reliable. And what I mean by reliable is that there's not a single go-to method that can be used across different metals, sites, and conditions that is durable. Limestone is used, but it's not very durable. Phosphate can be used, but it's usually only for lead. This creates uncertainty when it comes to remediation, and that keeps excavation the default. If Barefoot can create a single durable method, we can tip the scales away from excavation to in-place remediation and reduce costs by orders of magnitude. So I'm so happy to announce we have a new reliable in-place method. It's based on patent-pending Yale technology, and it targets an array of cationic metals, including lead, chromium, copper, nickel, zinc, manganese. And so what this looks like is using enhanced rock weathering. So a rock powder from a nearby quarry, maybe it's mined waste. And so we haul it in, we spread it out, and we mix it into the soil with tractors. The rock dissolves, pH goes up, so does absorption. New minerals form, and the metals bind long-term and strongly to the mineral lattice. That reduces the risk to leaching into groundwater and plant uptake. And as a bonus, we also improve soil fertility broadly. And the most beautiful thing is that this fits right into existing regulatory workflows and testing. Regulators don't need to change anything. The same tests, the same process. So you may be asking, well, Quinn, what does an actual remediation look like? Simple. We go in, we assess, we baseline test, maybe do some benchline testing. We apply our amendment, verify with EPA leaching tests, and we close the site. We use the exact same leaching tests, they're gold standard that the EPA uses, the TCLP, the SPLP. We pass those, the site moves forward. We also use the same industrial, commercial, and residential uses. So field scale validation comes from my doctoral work. It was funded by the Yale Center for Natural Carbon Capture. In a 4-year study, we saw 60 to 80% reductions in soil extractable lead, aluminum, and nickel, and also reductions in groundwater within just 3 to 9 months. And this was consistent with prior long-term studies with one over 25 years and studies at contamination levels. So the economics are very compelling. We modeled a representative brownfield site using conservative assumptions, and we found that Barefoot was around 60 times cheaper than excavation. And that was due to costly trucking and expensive tipping fees. And that's the tipping point that makes remediating these sites actually viable. So there's a large national market. We have a TAM of 36 billion, but our beachhead is here in Connecticut in the Northeast. It overlaps with EPA Region 1. That SAM is around 240 million. So the reason why Connecticut is so good is because of high site density, short hauls from quarries, and strong public funding. So our business model will rely on project-based revenue early on, and then we'll bridge to licensing to larger environmental engineering firms. So for our project-based revenue, we will start with a feasibility study that acts as a paid engineering step to the full contract, which could be around $2 million. So who buys? Landowners, municipalities, developers, subcontract referrals. And eventually, when we license to larger multinational engineering firms, think AECOM, Tetra Tech, we've already made contact and they're very interested. So we are the only company that is repurposing enhanced rock weathering for brownfield remediation. But in practice, we do compete against two buckets: excavation, players like Tetra Tech, and other in-place conventional methods like RETEC. But our advantage is simple. We make the in-place method reliable, and we can revolutionize brownfield remediation. So we have had substantial traction and demand. We have a city-supported pilot in New Haven with a letter of intent, 112 Chapel Street. It's an old lead paint project. We also have a committed quarry partner with a letter of intent and quote. We also have regulatory oversight commitment from a licensed environmental professional. So this year, we'll start our first pilot in New Haven. Next year, we want our first full contract and to build out a field team. By 2028, we'll scale deployments, license technology. We are the right team to do this. We are a Yale spinout over at Climate Haven. We're working under the scientific guidance of Professor John Fortner, chair of Yale Chemical Engineering, and a world-renowned expert. We're also working with Dean Mack from the city. So the $35,000 from the Planetary Solutions Prize would be catalytic for building Barefoot. It would go to fund our first pilot in New Haven. It would be split across field support, transportation, regulatory validation. Look, it's time we finally get these sites cleaned up, restoring communities and protecting the environment. With that, I yield my time and open it up to questions.
Thank you for the presentation, and super cool to see you working on this problem. I'll admit up front that I'm a slave to my experience, having worked on a quarry transaction over a decade ago.
Okay.
But using that as a lead-in, can you just talk about what growth would look like given the heterogeneity of, say, concentrations of brownfield sites as you move away from the really populous Northeast with a lot of old industrial sites, right? Like Connecticut, no-brainer first starting place, especially given the proximity with Yale. But I guess like what happens as you go west, and not only the density changes of brownfields, but also say the quarry rock composition, chemical composition, also all of that good stuff. And I'm asking this because this is exciting enough that I'm curious to see what comes next.
Sure. So let me just say, yes, Connecticut in the Northeast has the highest density in the country. But this is actually an international problem. Over in places like Europe or Asia, brownfields are a serious problem. Old mills, old factories, England especially from the Industrial Revolution, you have a lot of these old mills that have still lead and heavy metal contamination. So there's a lot of growth actually worldwide. When it comes to the quarries, now that's a very interesting thing. I actually want to show you how many quarries are in Connecticut. It's insane, but actually basalt is a very common rock. There's a lot in Oregon. There's a lot of different kinds of rock around the world, a lot in Brazil. And the beautiful part is we can use nearby quarries just like this. So they're everywhere, okay?
Thank you. If I was a quarry,
Okay.
I know why I'd love this, right? You've just increased the value of what I own. In your position, the position of verifying the value and then capturing a part of that, how at scale, once you've de-risked this process, how will you make sure you stay in between the quarry and the brownfield site? What part will you patent or defend as a business?
Sure. So what we do have a patent that is over at Yale Ventures, or a provisional patent. And what we defend is using this material in a regulatory sense. So actually taking it onto a brownfield, passing the TCLP and SPLP, and making regulatory progress. That is our defensible line. And could you repeat the first part of that question?
You're creating a lot of value for
Creating
the
a lot of
quarry,
value.
but your ability to capture it is less clear.
Yes. Okay. Well, here's what I would say. I would say that we have a letter of intent from a quarry here in Connecticut, actually in Massachusetts, and they just give this stuff away. This is a waste. So we're actually taking their waste and turning it into new value. And like I said, there are so many quarries in Connecticut and Massachusetts that if we want to capture that value and they are giving us a hard time, we could find another quarry somewhere else. It's not limited by one specific kind of quarry. So, thank you.
What work have you done, and have you proven to your satisfaction that it's a stable solution, like 20, 30, 40 years out? And have you thought about liability down the road?
Sure. Well, I think one thing that's very important is that every remediation site, they've been using limestone and soil amendments on these brownfields for decades. So that's nothing new. This plugs right into the existing remediation practice. But there have been long-term studies that have found that you're at a new chemical durable state beyond 27 years. And so it's not, so this is a permanent long-term solution. So, okay.
I have actually a basic question about the product that you're selling. Is it just the product? Is it a product plus the service? As you're doing these initial pilots with these sites and you sort of see how it goes, what piece of it are you interested in keeping moving forward?
So the model is we are selling regulatory progress. And so we act as an environmental, basically, remediation service. And that is our value. While we maybe eventually could create our own blends of rock and sort of sell that, our primary core value is that we know the kinds of blends and the kinds of dose rate that we can actually achieve regulatory progress. And the way we do that is with a feasibility study at first that acts as the engineering step for the full remediation.
I just want to ask a variant of Brandon's question, who has substantial additional grace that I don't, so I'll be much more blunt. I guess when I heard his question, it was a great one. How do you stop the quarries from just, stealing your product and trying to take over, is I think what he was asking, and I'll ask it more bluntly.
Sure.
And disintermediate that, whether not just through patents, but you don't obviously need to share them, trade secrets or business strategy. Because right now, they maybe have the incentive to be a good partner, but when they realize it's big business, what stops them from disintermediating you entirely?
So in Connecticut, you need to have a licensed environmental professional sign off on your cleanup. And so once you have a track record, that's very important. Municipalities, landowners, they trust you once you've actually shown traction and you build relationships with licensed environmental professionals. And and you will also build up a big data set and a lot of sort of know-how that it's much easier for them to actually buy you or license the technology, and you can help them actually implement this. And in fact, that's actually how when a larger engineering company, which is probably actually the main concern that we'd have, not necessarily the quarries, because they don't do soil remediation, it is much easier for them to either acquire us or to license from us rather than to sort of replicate from us. That's generally how it works within the remediation industry. Yes. Okay, thank you.
All right. Keep your excitement up. If anyone needs a quick second to wiggle your shoulders, stand up, sit down. We're good? All good? Everyone's awake? Everyone's excited? These have been awesome. All right. So join me in welcoming our fourth and final pitch. come up onto the stage George who will be presenting Olmsted. America has the capital, technology, and demand for clean energy, but permitting requires 5+ years and 40+ agency reviews before projects can break down. Olmsted cuts through this critical bottleneck, unlocking projects stuck in regulatory limbo. Excited to hear about it.
Thanks, Josie. Hi, everyone. I'm George, the founder of Olmsted. Thanks for being here today. America is in an energy crisis, specifically a clean energy crisis. The past 2 decades, we've had virtually flat electricity demand in this country. But because of recent data center buildouts and the reshoring of manufacturing, we are now expecting to see a 20% increase in the demand for energy in this country over the next decade. And when we look at what it will take to meet our country's net zero goals for 2050, we can see that it'll actually take a 40% increase in clean energy resources to reach that target because of the intermittency of solar and wind. Today, I want to talk to you about what I see as one of the root causes of the clean energy shortage. And that root cause is permitting. Permitting is unnecessarily complex. We have the technology and we have the capital in this country to deploy clean energy at scale. The issue is permitting. As you can see here, permitting now takes 3 times as long for clean energy projects as it did 2 decades ago. And unfortunately, only a small fraction of clean energy projects ever make it all the way through permitting. Only 1/8 of solar projects. Permitting has become a maze that is bottlenecking clean energy deployment. Did you know that in this country we have 1,300 gigawatts of installed power capacity, but we have twice that much, 2,600 gigawatts, that is stuck in development, that is delayed by slow permitting. At Olmsted, we want to provide our customers with the map to solve that permitting maze. I have personally spent 7 years navigating this maze. I've been the project manager for a solar development that was stuck in archaeological permitting for 9 months. I've advised utilities that had their transmission lines in right-of-way permitting for 5 years. And as an investor, I saw an offshore wind development in permitting for so long that the earlier permits that were approved expired, essentially killing the project. I am building Olmsted because these delays should not happen in the future. Olmsted is a 3-in-1 permitting intelligence platform. The first feature I want to talk to you about is our workflow engine. Olmsted wants to make sure that developers have all their projects, all their permits in one place. And the most important thing I want to draw your attention to is the interdependencies in permitting, because that is the hardest part. When you have 40 to 50 permits and you can't file permit B until you have permit A approved, and you don't know how long permit A will take, that leads to this big complex maze, as I talked about, that current Excel and email chains and current solutions just are no longer fit to solve. That is what Olmsted's here for. The next thing that we want to do is to make sure there is one source of truth for all of the developers and their army of advisors. Developers shouldn't have to deal with version control issues on 100-page legal documents across 5 different email chains. All of the files should live on Olmsted. And this is something developers are already used to. When they sell the project, they use these data rooms with their potential buyers. And this is something that we want to bring up to the permitting phase. And last but not least, the one I'm most excited about is to leverage AI to generate real permitting intelligence for developers. Some of the key questions that developers have, for instance, in New Haven, what is the #1 reason that a wetlands permit gets denied and needs to be refiled? Olmsted has your answer and is at the touch It is at your fingertips with our AI permitting assistant. So why is this all important? Because every month that a clean energy project gets delayed is a direct hit to its IRR and a higher likelihood that it doesn't happen. After a few months, it might just be tens of thousands of carrying costs, but when it gets to 6 months, when it gets to 12 months, that's what makes the difference between a solar project that pencils or a solar project that unfortunately dies. Next, I want to talk to you about some work that we've already been doing with a customer who wants to build community solar in Maryland. But I don't want your takeaway from this slide to be that Caroline County is the best county to build community solar in Maryland, although that might be a fun fact for your friends from Maryland. What I want you to take away from this is that Olmsted is building a data-driven moat. What I mean by that is that this is all from public filings, but the insights are proprietary. And I personally spent years making investment decisions and making sure we're developing in the right places based on going through these filings, and that's what I want to turn into a product. And that leads me directly to our go-to-market strategy. When I first built this and started selling it to developers, I did realize that there was a bit of fatigue with another workflow management tool. What I did find out, however, is that when you put real data, real valuable insights in front of them, that is what really captures their attention. And so this is why this data-driven moat is so important, because it is what gets our foot in the door. Once we have them in the door, the plan is to onboard them onto our workflow engine, which will be bolstered by the data. They'll know this permit typically takes 6 months to approve, and so on. And with that, we will build our flywheel, where we're able to, with every new customer and project that we add, improve our data sets and improve permitting intelligence across the country. So why will the Planetary Solutions funding be so critical to accelerate the growth of Olmsted? It is because the number one thing we need right now with our customers is trust. And the way to build that is by putting in front of them, month after month, the latest and greatest permitting intel. I've already personally invested my own money into building our initial data sets. But what customers want to see now is those insights month after month, quarter after quarter. This is what this money will go towards. With the funding, we will be able to build a wide data set and do comparative analysis and earn these customers' trust faster. And without it, it will probably continue to be ad hoc for each customer, each county, one by one. I believe that accelerating that and giving customers the full picture of what we're capable of will be critical to converting pilots into paid customers. So I want to leave you with a statistic. For every 100 megawatts of clean energy that Olmsted accelerates through permitting and gets into operation, that is the equivalent of removing the emissions from 25,000 gas cars off the road permanently. We have the technology and we have the capital in the country to do this. What we don't have is the permitting solution. I want to make sure that projects don't run into the same issues that I did when I was working. I want to make sure that they have the permitting intelligence that they need. And with your help, we can make that happen. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for this. The process you described could you framed it as and designed it as a clean energy permitting solution. It could presumably equally well be applicable in other industries, and construction industry has similar products. How do you think about opportunity and the headwinds that clean energy is facing and the implications for demand and willingness to pay? And I know in your roadmap you had, for example, data centers as one of the product development areas. How strong, since this is a Planetary Solutions Prize, how strong is your conviction to stay with the clean energy demand and chase that when there's stronger demand and currents coming from other areas that are sort of competing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think immediate answer, I do, as you mentioned, the construction software. So one of the design partners that we're working with, they currently use Procore for the construction management. And I do think a lot of the solutions for construction, so post-permitting construction and pre-permitting site selection, those are already around, and we have some of the other folks that provide that here. What I personally missed when I was working in this space, and what I haven't seen since, is that permitting tool especially. And on this topic of clean energy versus other sources, the data center work, in addition to developing solar and wind, I also worked on data center developments in the last 2 years. And there are also tools ready for that just because of the amount of money in it, and folks are focusing on that. And I think the clean energy piece, especially the last 2 years, it's a kind of a confluence of permitting has gotten much harder, but also attention has been brought away from clean energy, and that is why we need this. In the near term, while there's less subsidies and funding going into clean energy, I really want to focus on transmission, because that is something I have personal experience with, and transmission is what is going to unlock more renewables in this country, because right now, as you might know, the interconnection queue is why we can't add more renewables, and we have such an aging grid in this country, and that is somewhere I think we could absolutely help accelerate the deployment of not just clean energy, but the transmission that supports it. And hopefully, after a couple years, that we'll have renewed interest in more fulsome clean energy deployment, because I think we definitely need that, as you saw on the first chart.
Awesome. Thank you for the presentation. I can see when you get to scale how this would be enormously transformative, having worked in this space. I guess, and this is me being ignorant on the topic, when you think about like the near-term customer value proposition, given the fragmented nature of development, right? Like the rules are different from one county to the next, et cetera. How do you attract customers today, and what is the value proposition you're pitching to them? Because the assumption might be, and I think you're right, that, well, these are systemic problems. It's not a data problem. We're really good at our jobs. So if I were to push back like that as a prospective customer, what would be your sales pitch back to me for the next 6, 12 months? What am I getting out of this product?
Sure. Yeah. So the customers that I've spoken to, they already pay for intelligence in other parts of the value chain. Halcyon is actually a great example. That is more FERC, federal level regulations, and reports about moratoriums on data centers and so on. So what this is, it's giving that intelligence at the permitting level. And on your question of what it really creates and unlocks for these teams, I think that the best use of a permitting and development team's time is not to go through Excels and find out what permit is due next week and what needs to be done yesterday. I think the best use of their time is to talk with the local counties and towns and make sure there's support. A few decades ago, there wasn't even support for solar and wind. It's very much an education process at each of these, as you said, in a fragmented way. And that is in my conversations as well, that is what folks want to be spending their time on, as opposed to pushing paperwork. And that is, in the next 6 to 12 months, what we'll unlock for them.
I'm glad you pulled up the appendix and started to talk through the competition a bit. Where everyone, this is a drag race, right, to the finish. It's a
absolutely
very exciting field. Mm-hmm. Halcyon just raised $30 million. There is an ideal customer profile for you, right, where you'll have an edge as an entrepreneur, as a business model. Could you describe that, right, where there are very sophisticated investors, like your old firm, like a Brookfield-backed developer, and then there are wildcatters and maybe teams that don't consider a data scientist as an important hire, right? Who are you targeting, and how will that sort of compound your edge in a growing, crowded field?
Yeah, sure. I think definitely starting with these developers that have in the range of 10 to 25 projects. The folks that we're talking to mostly have teams of 10 to 15 that really need this product. As you saw, we started with community solar. I think that's a very compelling niche that we can start to build into and use that as our beachhead. That is somewhere where just because of the lean, how lean the teams are, that they don't have time, frankly, to keep up with all of the permitting updates and see all the filings that are posted and learn from them. And that is what we want to focus on. Frankly, the larger developers, the Brookfields, like you mentioned, I definitely think that a tool like this could be useful for them. But as you said, they have their processes already. And the idea here is that I really see it. The plan is to build this flywheel, but on the business model, there's also, I'm excited about licensing this data and essentially being able to, even for some of the largest firms, providing intel that they don't have today that will be augmented by some of these smaller customers who are actually on the ground and doing the projects in these smaller counties and more on the ground. Yeah.
Back to the value prop question a little bit. The true, I think, effectiveness would be projects are happening and projects are happening more quickly. Is there a way, or have you imagined a way to be able to pin your product to that success? Like, is that measurable? It's kind of it's almost like a counterfactual universe, right? Like, if you wouldn't have had my product, this wouldn't have happened, but that didn't happen. So how do you measure that? And how are you reflecting that in what you are offering as your value prop?
Yeah, absolutely. So on one of the solar projects I worked on, every month of delays on this roughly 100 megawatt solar project was about $300,000 of carrying costs, just additional SG&A we had to stomach during the process. And this is something where, in the models that we used to run, every single month is a hit to IRR that a project's delayed versus when it was supposed to be built. And that is something I think it also in my customer conversations so far, that's very clear to folks that it's definitely a matter of, can we build this versus can we not? But even building it 3 to 6 months earlier, it really, I agree that we shouldn't be optimizing for their needs, but it really does matter to them that their returns 25 versus 23% really does matter to them. And that is what I see as the value prop for the ultimate buyers. Thank you.
All right, that was our fourth and final presentation for today. Thank you all so much for attending. I hope you have learned something new and have some ideas that you'll share with the founders as you find them throughout the day. I also hope you had some fun. I think this is so much fun. And just real quick before you all head off, I want to acknowledge some of the people who help make this fun. So one more round of applause to all four who just pitched. And to our 4 judges for all their questioning. Thanks to the Planetary Solutions team and also to everyone at SciCity who kind of is behind the scenes and like all these black jackets walking around to make everything happen today. And then also finally, I would like to thank the CBAY funding team. These 3 students sitting up in the front, raise your hands. They've done a lot of work along with Stu to get this to this point and help all these teams with their pitches and kind of go through all of the awesome applicants we got for this prize. Okay, last thing before I send you off, 2 things, sorry. Don't forget to submit your audience choice votes. Those are on your seat. Fill those out, and there's little boxes in the back, or if you want to hand them to one of us, feel free to do that. And then we will all meet back here on this stage at 5:30 to hear who won. So you have to sit and wait and think about who you think won, but we will not hear until the end of the day. So we hope to see you back here and enjoy your day. We hope you have some great conversations, and thank you all for being here.